It's Wednesday, September 20. In the headlines, the Finance Ministry set to release some of SSL's clients' funds. We have an update on Jamaica's tourism pension scheme. In business news, Flair Airlines launches new route between Canada and Jamaica. Regionally, CARICOM remains firm in support of SDGs. Internationally, Ukraine war remains the focus as UN General Assembly gets underway. And in sports, Reggae Girls to face Canada in Olympic qualifier. This is the news on PBC Jamaica. I'm Simone Absalom Gale. The Ministry of Finance will be releasing some of the funds that had been frozen due to the high-level probe into the operations of Stocks and Securities Limited, SSL. The ministry in a release says, quote, beginning on Friday, September 22, SSL will begin the process of transferring these Jamaican dollars clients' securities from SSL's custody to other security dealers selected by clients, and any Jamaican dollars cash balances in client accounts will be transferred to banks specified by clients, end quote. The development comes 8 months after all accounts at SSL were frozen after it emerged in January this year that fraudulent activities have been happening at the entity. Up to 70 client accounts were reportedly defrauded of up to $20 million. One person has been charged in the matter so far. The Minister of Education and Youth, Favour Williams, says her team received files for 782 teachers on or before September 12th to take up new posts. Speaking in Parliament on Tuesday, she informed that measures are in place to ensure that these new teachers are paid at the end of the month.
With the subsequent employment of new teachers at very short notice, the Ministry of Education and Youth has had to implement new mechanisms to ensure that new teachers are paid in the month of September. Madam Speaker, under normal circumstances, for a teacher to be paid in a particular month, the employment documents must be submitted by the last working day of the previous month. For example, to be paid in September, all relevant employment documents must be submitted to the ministry by the last working day in the month of August. However, given that many of the new teachers were employed this month, the ministry extended the deadline for submission to September 12.
Of the total, 624 were processed and 158 were deemed incomplete because they did not meet the required standard to enable payment. In addition, 373 new teachers' files were submitted after the extended deadline. According to the Accountant General's Department, at least $2 billion has already been released into the accounts of bursar-paid schools, which are those high schools that pay teachers directly. Minister of Tourism Edmund Bartlett says almost 9,000 persons have subscribed to the Tourism Workers Pension Scheme, bringing in more than $1 billion in savings. This includes hotel workers as well as persons employed in related industries such as craft vendors, tour operators, red cap porters, contract carriage operators, and workers at attractions.
We are encouraging more and more of the workers because now the fund has over 2 billion Jamaican dollars in it, accreting interest and growing at a rate of $74 million a year. Sorry, $74 million a month. So by the end of this year, we expect that the number of members will increase, and we're hoping to pass our 10,000 mark because that's the first target. When we do that, we would have reached also our 3 billion mark.
At the time of its implementation in January 2020, the government provided $1 billion to seed the fund. This ensured that qualified pensioners who met the vested period of 5 years could receive the immediate benefits.
To indicate that, Jamaica's leadership in these areas are not going without notice. Other countries have asked us for the act, to look at the act with a view of instituting it in their country. I'm not going to call the name of the Prime Minister who I sent the first one to last week, but the ask was a very flattering one, because what it says is that something is done right here.
The pension scheme has the potential of nearly 500,000 contributors. Currently, about 350,000 people in Jamaica are employed in the sector. The tourism minister was speaking during an interview with the Jamaica Information Service. Jamaica and other Caribbean countries now have access to an insurance scheme that will protect essential water and sanitation services in Caribbean countries at risk of natural disasters. On Tuesday, the United Kingdom announced a $25 million investment to establish the scheme, dubbed the Caribbean Water Utility Insurance Collective, CWUIC. It will provide rapid payouts to repair services damaged by disasters such as hurricanes and floods. Early action to restore access to safe drinking water can help prevent the spread of diseases. All Caribbean water and sanitation utilities are encouraged to join and will benefit from insurance at substantially below commercial prices and investments to build resilience to disasters. UK grants will also enable utilities in Jamaica, Belize, Haiti, Dominican Republic, Guyana, and Suriname to buy the insurance they need. With the risk of extreme weather increasing due to climate change, disaster risk finance schemes such as CWUIC reduce costs for the most vulnerable countries and enable faster recovery. Now for a look at part 2 of a JIS feature on the Jamaica Urban Transit Company's new electric buses and its pilot phase. The plan is to have at least 200 of these buses in JUTC over the next 5 years.
The e-bus being used for the test is disabled friendly and includes a wheelchair access feature. Feedback so far suggests that commuters are very excited about riding on the electric bus.
They're very curious about it because, you're accustomed to hearing an engine running and you're accustomed to hearing noises all over, and this is just as silent as your grandmother's sewing machine. So it's very interesting for them, and the feedback has been excellent so far. They keep asking, when are we getting more?
The question of when more e-buses are coming is easily answered. What will happen long term will only be determined after the pilot testing phase is completed.
Originally, the pilot is for 6 months, but as you are aware, we have additional buses coming, 5 EV buses and some 45 diesel buses. We are thinking that it is important that we expand the pilot program to 9 months. In that way, we can gather as much information as possible to determine the way forward.
We explored some of the e-bus's amazing features. The Spanish Town depot is also equipped with a charging station to recharge the unit. 3 more charging stations will be installed with the next set of electric buses to be incorporated in the pilot testing. Meanwhile, Quality Assurance Specialist at the JUTC, Barrington Brown, explains some of the technical features of the electric bus.
The unit takes 2.5 hours, 2.5 hours to charge at 80%. So the bus will not go below 20%. That's a minimum. The unit can run on 100% full charge for 225 kilometers, and that's equivalent to 10 hours. For my studies, EV compared to diesel, it's very easy to maintain. Most of our diesel buses have lubrication leaks. Our EV doesn't have lubrication. So we don't have any seals to change and all of that.
During the e-bus pilot program, the dealer will provide technical support for maintenance, while JUTC mechanics will understudy.
It has been performing wonderful because feedback from the driver Passengers love it, and it's maintenance, almost maintenance free.
The government is committed to driving the quest to preserve Jamaica's environment and people through cleaner technology. The electric bus pilot program is one of several stops on the road to modernizing Jamaica's public transportation sector.
Time now for the business report with Danita Rodney.
Canada's leading independent carrier, Flair Airlines, has announced it will be offering a new route between Canada and Jamaica starting December 16. The leisure airline will offer 1,134 seats 3 times weekly on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays between Toronto Pearson and Kingston. Jamaica is one of several countries the airline has expanded its service to, including Punta Cana, the Dominican Republic, and various destinations in Mexico. Now for your market updates. In foreign exchange trading for Tuesday, September 19, the US dollar sold for an average of $155.67. The Canadian dollar ended trading at $115.43. The pound sterling traded for $193.90, and the euro sold for $166.79. In JSE trading, the JSE index declined by over 2,127 points. The junior market index declined by over 21 points. The combined market index declined by over 2,184 points. And the All Jamaican Composite Index declined by over 2,014 points. Overall market activity resulted from trading in 98 stocks, of which 40 advanced, 46 declined, and 12 traded firm. Stocks advanced for 138 Student Living Jamaica Limited, Access Financial Services Limited, and Berita Investments Limited. Stocks declined for AMG Packaging and Paper Company Limited, Cargo Handlers Limited, and Caribbean Assurance Brokers Limited. Trading firm were Blue Power Group Limited, Carreras Limited, and Dollar Financial Services Limited. The overall volume leaders were Trans-Jamaican Highway Limited with over 1 million units, One-on-One Educational Services Limited with over 600,000 units, and Stationery and Office Supplies Limited with over 500,000 units. In regional stocks, in Trinidad and Tobago, the mutual fund market did not record any activity. On the Barbados Stock Exchange, Epic Caribbean Property Fund Value Fund was the volume leader with 10,000 shares. They were followed by First Caribbean International Bank, which traded 87 shares. In regional business, Barbados' Prime Minister Mia Mottley continues to call for reforms of the international financial system. She made another case for Barbados and small island developing states at the High-Level Political Forum on Sustainable Development as part of the 2023 Sustainable Development Goals Summit in New York.
I'm hoping that we can have a joint effort between the World Bank, the IMF in particular, and the UN to be able to bring to the table the credit rating agencies and the markets, because regrettably we value short-term lending, but do not understand that if countries are going to invest in education and healthcare, they need 30 and 40-year money in order to be able to do so. Our situation has been compounded by the pandemic, and therefore that long-term money is critical. Secondly, we need mission-oriented lending. Professor Mazzucato has been making this point, and in fact, in Barbados, we've set 6 missions, recognizing that all of our policies, including the terms and conditions for access to finance, have to reinforce the missions.
But to recognize the intertwined nature of the challenges that we are facing with climate, with pandemics, with fragility, with war, with food insecurity, and recognize that you cannot solve one without having a holistic view of the total. And so the vision of the bank will be to end poverty in a world, in a livable planet. So the livable planet is very, very important. That's what allows us to address some of these issues.
In international business, Wall Street's main indexes closed lower as investors took cover ahead of the U.S. Federal Reserve's two-day monetary policy meeting.
The Dow shed 0.3%, while the S&P 500 and NASDAQ each dipped about 0.2. Though the Fed is expected to announce Wednesday that it will leave interest rates unchanged, it will also release its projections for potential future rate hikes, inflation, and economic growth. Meanwhile, the IPO market continued to show signs of life, with grocery delivery app Instacart's parent company Maple Bear making its NASDAQ debut, days after chipmaker ARM Holdings' stellar entry into the public marketplace. Maple Bear shares jumped more than 12%, while ARM Holdings lost nearly 5%. Thomas Martin, senior portfolio manager at Globalt Investments, says ARM's volatility is due to it being a tech company whose value is often tied to interest rates.
Basically when the supply and demand and excitement over a new asset to own dies down, it'll go back to the metrics that are associated with its end markets and its end users and its technology. So it is very exciting, but those companies that are trading at fairly high multiples, with interest rates high, they're going to be subject to that kind of volatility. So kind of welcome to the world. Glad you got a good start, ARM, but now you're going to have to battle just like everybody else.
In other company news, shares of Walt Disney slid more than 3.5% after the company announced it would nearly double its capital expenditure for its parks business over the next 10 years. And Starbucks shares shed 1.5% following TD Cowen's decision to downgrade the coffee chain shares to underperform.
In market data for oil prices fell ahead of the U.S. Federal Reserve's interest rate decision, with investors uncertain when peak rates will be hit and how much of an impact it will have on energy demand. Brent crude futures fell by 69 cents to $93.65, and West Texas Intermediate crude futures shed 72 cents to $90.48 a barrel. And that was the business report on PBCJ. I'm Danita Rodney.
In regional news, Bahamian Prime Minister Philip Davis, while on the world stage that seeks to combat the world's most pressing issues, told the international audience that climate financing gap needs to be closed.
Prime Minister Philip Davis in New York, participating in the Clinton Global Initiative. The event, established by President Bill Clinton in 2005, brings together world leaders to create and implement solutions to world issues such as climate change. In his address, the Prime Minister announcing the organization of a new investment program, which he says will benefit all involved.
I'm excited to tell you about the Bahamas Sustainable Investment Program. We are going to survive an era of supercharged storms by creating supercharged win-win investment partnerships. With our strategic advisors, Resilience Capital Ventures, we will work with regional and global capital market leaders to underwrite and place an innovative financing facility with a target of initially $500 million.
There are a number of key priorities which the investment fund will focus on.
Climate resilient infrastructure, our clean energy transition, coastal zone conservation, reducing biodiversity loss, regenerative agriculture, carbon sequestration, and participation in the natural-backed carbon credit programs.
Since taking office, combating climate change has been at the forefront of the Davis administration's agenda. The Prime Minister reaffirming the country's commitment to being part of the active solution.
My government and the people of the Bahamas welcome the partnership with the Clinton Global Initiative on this commitment to action.
CARICOM remains firm in its support for the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, even as it expressed concerns at some of the hindrances to achieving the United Nations mandate by 2030. Dominica's President Charles Savarin says the 15-member bloc position on the path towards achieving the SDGs has been clearly outlined in several debates and intergovernmental negotiations under the auspices of the United Nations. He also says the summit provides a unique opportunity to fundamentally adjust the trajectory of all member states to take positive action towards its implementation.
CARICOM endorses the political declaration set out by the Secretary General in a renewed call for all member states to recommit towards this transformative process. The existential threat of COVID-19 over the last 3 years, exacerbated by the impact of climate change and war in Ukraine, calls for even greater leadership at the multilateral level. Therefore, what is required is a surge in commitments for governments and other stakeholders to take implementation of the SDGs to the next level.
The United Nations is at a halfway point in a deadline to achieve the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals agenda. Belize's Prime Minister, John Bresciano, gave an address Tuesday afternoon during the leaders' dialogue on the country's progress.
While ongoing crises are deterring our efforts, systemic inequities at global levels have long been undermining our aspirations. Today, I reaffirm Belize's unwavering commitment to achieving the SDGs. These goals remain the only ambitious, universally agreed blueprint to achieve an equitable and sustainable future for all. The highest priority for my government is reducing poverty. Belize commits to reducing poverty by 50% by 2030, in alignment with the fundamental principle of leaving no one behind. We are committed to redoubling our actions to build resilience and ensure that everyone wins by implementing the National Energy Policy, the National Land Use Policy, develop a comprehensive industrial strategy that integrates green and blue industrial policies, achieve protection of 30% of the marine space by 2026, including protection of 20% of the coral reef, implement our national blue economic policy. We further commit to reducing land degradation through our land restoration strategy, mitigate biodiversity loss via the revised national biodiversity strategy, implement integrated water resource management approaches, and foster agroforestry systems.
In international news, Russia and its war with Ukraine remains a focus of the UN General Assembly as the country's President Vladimir Zelensky addressed the assembly in person. Al Jazeera's Patty Culhane reports.
His need to rally the world community clear with his presence. For the first time, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky addressing the United Nations General Assembly in person and in English.
The full-scale war.
In an attempt to send a clear picture of the horrors of war, Zelensky detailing the plight of tens of thousands of Ukrainian children he says Russian forces have kidnapped and sent to Russia.
We are trying to get children back home, but time goes by. What will happen with them? What will happen to them? Those children in Russia are taught to hate Ukraine, and all ties with their families are broken. And this is clearly a genocide.
U.S. President Joe Biden clearly wanted to send the same message.
Russia alone bears responsibility for this war. Russia alone has the power to end this war immediately. And it's Russia alone that stands in the way of peace, because Russia's price for peace is Ukraine's capitulation, Ukraine's territory, and Ukraine's children.
But on the sidelines, there is talk that it may be time for peace, that Vladimir Putin could be persuaded to make a deal. Chatter Zelensky pointedly rejected. He says Putin is untrustworthy, pointing out the fate of a one-time Putin ally who seemed to cross him and died in a plane explosion.
I am aware of the attempts to make some shady dealings behind the scenes. Evil cannot be trusted. Ask Prigozhin.
Ukraine's expected to take center stage again here on Wednesday as the UN Security Council meets to talk about the war, and we expect that President Zelensky and Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov will be in the same room for the first time since the war started. Patty Culhane, Al Jazeera, at the UN headquarters.
In sports, the Reggae Girls will be at the office on Friday, September 22, playing against Canada in a bid to make Olympic history. It will be the first of a two-leg Olympic qualifying game, with the second match set for the BMO field in Toronto, Canada. With the second leg already sold out, President of the Jamaica Football Federation, Michael Ricketts, says that while the national stadium must be hired for the games, people and other athletic groups would be given complimentary tickets. Netballers, volleyball players, past national players, women's Premier League teams and high school girls teams will all be given tickets to the game. Match starts at 7 p.m. on Friday. The West Indies women are set for a 6-match series versus world powerhouse Australia, comprising 3 T20 internationals and 3 one-day internationals. It will be a tough ask for success against the double ICC champions, and a lot will depend on the world rankers on the West Indies squad combining with the rising stars.
The West Indies women's tour Australia is scheduled to begin on October 1st. With a T20 international in Sydney, and will feature the top 2 all-rounders on the ICC World Ranking in Australia's Ashley Gardner and Hayley Matthews of the West Indies. Unfortunately, the captain is the only West Indian ranked in the top 10 of all ODI categories, while the host has 2 all-rounders, 4 batters and 2 bowlers amongst the latest top 10s. Coupled with that daunting fact is the good news that the regional side will be touring with a contingent of the next generation of international players. The Rising Stars Quartet of Ashmini Munisa, Dejenba Joseph, Zaida James and Janelia Glasgow will have their first opportunity to measure themselves against the big guns. The crucial part of the tour will commence from October 8 with the one-day internationals, which will be an opportunity to garner points as the West Indies look to improve on the 9th place ranking on the 10-team table. Gardner and Matthews also lead the rankings amongst the all-rounders in this format. But there is some top 10 company for the skipper, with teammate Stephanie Taylor sitting in 10th on the batter's table. The gelling of experience and youth will have to hit its peak in October if the West Indies women intend to challenge the Australians. Wayne Cunningham, TTT Sport.
That's the news on PBCJ. You can follow us on our social media platforms at PBCJamaica. Thank you so much for watching, and remember, we are the People's Station.